This conference will now be recorded.
All right. I'm looking forward to today's session with Mark Smith and Chad Paalman. The topic really is how MSPs can work with their defense contracting clients to help them get CMC certified. And it's going to be a long journey for them to do that, but I think you have two of the best and most practical MSPs I know in the business, two of the best relationship managers in the business. So I'll start with Mark. Mark, can you give us a 30-second commercial on your company and where you're located and what you do well?
Sure. I don't really do very much well, but thank you very much for the compliments. I appreciate it. We're based in outside of Los Angeles, California, in the San Fernando Valley, and we're an MSP. About 90% of our revenue is driven by MSP clients, and obviously that's a lot of relationships. So that's what we do. And the quick intro into how I cut into the CMMC area is a lot of our clients are 4 or 5 of our customers are specialized in the defense industry, and they are going through CMMC compliance and have come to me and asked me how to take them there.
And all 5 of those clients are MRR clients, I assume, right? So fully managed clients.
They're fully managed clients, all of them.
And then on the lower left there, we have Chad Paalman, my good friend. And Chad, give your quick introduction to who you are and a little bit about both Nuwave and Prescott.
Sure. Well, thank you, Michael, and Mark. Always great to see you as well. So first of all, my original business is Nuwave Technology Partners, a managed IT company that is started in 2005 with my brother and my dad. And today, my dad is retired. My brother Kyle and I continue to operate the business. Nuwave is headquartered in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And a few years ago, a lot of our clients, actually our primary client vertical is manufacturing. A lot of our clients were starting to ask us about NIST-800-171 back in 2018, 2019. And in the fall of 2019, I got wind of the CMMC Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification. And I flew out to Washington, D.C. for the kickoff of the accreditation body for CMMC and recognized sitting in that room back in 2019 that this was going to be different. It was going to be something really very impactful to the managed IT community and really the entire defense industrial base as a whole. And the reason I felt that way and do feel that way still today is because a lot of regulatory compliance, whether it's HIPAA, PCI, or other regulatory frameworks, are self-attestation. So the company just needs to self-attest that they are compliant. And what was different when moving from NIST-800-171 to the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification, or CMMC, is that it required a third party to come in and actually assess and essentially validate that the organization was compliant with the framework. And having spent years and formerly having an electronic health record company, I saw that not everybody was actually compliant, even when they said or thought they were, whether it was intentional or not. So seeing that we were going to have a framework and a requirement out there that was going to impact hundreds of thousands of companies in the United States, I recognized that we needed to quickly get up to speed. So at the beginning of 2020, we began the process of going for Nuwave, getting Nuwave aligned with the CMMC framework. I won't spend this call because we could spend the entire call talking about the kind of I guess the journey of CMMC over the last couple of years. But there were some important things that I'll just bring closure to my opener here is that I met a gentleman along the way, Ryan Bonner. Ryan is a household name in the CMMC or actually NIST environment as a whole. And Ryan and I were talking and recognizing that there was just a big void out in the market where there was not really organizations that came in alongside managed IT companies, working with both them and their end client or organization seeking certification. So that's when Ryan and I and my brother Kyle, my business partner in Nuwave, said, hey, there's an opportunity here to do something different and come in alongside managed IT companies. And so we formed Prescott. And so Prescott is what we'll be here talking about today. Prescott, in a singular focus, is to come in alongside managed IT companies like Mark's company and help the managed IT company along with them and their end client to ultimately align to the CMMC framework, get certified, and then maintain certification.
And then
Just
what I'd like to
another,
add to that real quickly is,
go ahead.
Chad, is that as an MSP, you are required to have a company such as Prescott in order to take your customer through the CMMC compliance. So it's something that as an MSP, you're not allowed to do directly. You have to involve a third-party company, which is the reason that Chad formed Prescott and the reason that I approached him with the possibility of helping me with my clients.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mark, is that we recognized before forming Prescott, we recognized that for the Nuwave clients out there that we were part of what was being assessed. So Mark's absolutely right. To have a third party to come in separate and independent from the managed service provider is very important, because the managed service provider is part of the environment that's being assessed.
So let's start with the story from Mark's side and talk a little bit about how did this opportunity get created for you, I guess, in a sense. So did your clients come to you with saying that getting certified is a pain point to them right now? And what was their kind of driving force that made them come to you for some help?
That's a great question, Michael. I will attempt to answer it. I saw that there was this change in the environment for these customers that are in the defense industry, especially aerospace. Many of our clients focus specifically on the aerospace industry, making bombs, et cetera, for the defense companies. And this compliance was coming down the pipeline, and I had read a lot about it and heard a lot about it. So I basically brought to all of their attention that, hey, you're going to have to go through the CMMC compliance at one point over the next 2 to 3 years. It's going to happen. So rather than be reactive to it, I like to be proactive and get together with all of you, because all of my customers in a group together, and discuss kind of how you want, if you want ABI to help you through the process, and if you'd like my assistance. So they were very appreciative of the fact that I brought it up to them, and they actually all came to my office and we sat in the conference room. So it was 4 different customers, all of the CEOs of those businesses, and we talked about it. What does it look like? What does it involve? And the fact that they said to me, look, you're our trusted partner. We really want to leverage you to take us through the process. We know you don't know everything about it. We're comfortable with that, but we're comfortable that you're smart enough, which was their first mistake, to take us through the process. So that was how that kind of vision started. It was definitely something that was started by me initially as I saw it happening. And then once they saw and got wind of it, they wanted to kind of take it to the completion process.
I think when we talked previously too, you were telling me that in fact, at least one, if not 2 of them, were actually going to be precluded from getting some contracts or bidding on some contracts unless they got at least a SPRS score or something. Am I remembering this correctly?
That's correct. So out of all of those clients, one of them had their POs cut off from one of their customers, one of their biggest customers. That was about 90 days ago when we started the process. They had just received notification of that from their customer. So getting that SPRS score was critical to them. And of course, then we became reactive as opposed to proactive. And now it was, I need to get it done in the next 4 weeks because I've got to get these POs released so that I can assemble the products and deliver them.
Just out of curiosity, Chad, are you hearing that people are putting teeth like that behind their procurement these days in terms of SPRS scores?
We are, and it's only going to significantly increase over the next, and my prediction is over the next 12 to 24 months. CMMC is not going away. There's been a lot of movement in the last month in the CMMC front, and specifically to your question, we're getting calls. Sometimes they're panic calls of companies who say, "Hey, we need to have our SPRS score, like Mark just said, our supplier performance risk system score. We need to have that submitted." And so we've had clients who in fact, we had a company that is a architectural firm, and they were trying to get a bid packet from the Army Corps of Engineers. They couldn't even get the bid packet without their SPRS score submitted. So we're just starting to see it happen, and it's going to dramatically start increasing over the next year.
Yeah, that's my kind of casual observation too. Is that you heard there's a lot of noise about CMMC, but there seems to be teeth coming into the process now, where there is a
Right.
penalty for people to not do what they're supposed to do, frankly. So go back to your story, Mark. So let's take the one that was the first client, and I assume it'll be pretty similar with the second client. So how did you organize yourself to help them?
So we had a meeting, and I said I have a friend of mine that is in part of my forum of owners, and he set a separate company aside to specifically help go through the CMMC compliance process. I met and I said, would it be okay if I brought them in, because I, as your MSP, am not allowed to take you through the certification process. I can only be there to advise and to implement once we know it needs to get done. And they said 100%, let's get started. So I organized a meeting with myself, Chad, and the client. We talked briefly about the whole CMMC process, kind of what's involved in that in order to get there. It's essentially broken up into two phases, which I'll let Chad talk about a little bit more. But the first phase is to get and develop that score. So you need the SPRS score, and that first phase gets you that. And that's what a lot of these customers right now need. It's a long process. I was told by Chad, hey, this is going to be painful. It's not easy. It's going to take a couple months. It's meetings every week. And I said, oh, Chad, it's fine. It's not a problem. and it was meetings every week, and it was exhausting and tiring. So we went through the process, and in the end, we got the SPRS score, and that customer was very satisfied, very happy. They were able to get POs issued to them. They had taken, by the way, the customer along for that ride, Chad, and they had told him, hey, we're doing this, we're going to have it within 60 days. And the customer said, that's why I'm sticking with you. I can't issue the PO until you actually get me the SPRS score, but the fact that you're doing it is exciting to me, and I'll stick with you until we get that accomplished. So that was the process. I was involved in the phone calls every week for a while, and then I couldn't do much more because it was exhausting. But we continued until completion, until they got that SPRS score, and it was very successful. And I think there was a lot learned on all sides of the from Chad's business to my business to the end user about how this process kind of evolves and what's involved to get it there. It was very fascinating, and truly it's something, like Michael, to your point, it's very important that these businesses have it, and there's going to be teeth behind it.
So just one last quick question for you, Mark. So what did the team look like that was going through this process together? Chad will get into Prescott's configuration here in a second, but so it was you. Was it anybody else from ABI included, or was it pretty much you?
It was
Okay.
me. It was the CEO and a couple people from the companies. In one instance, it was the CEO plus one additional member of their team, or two additional members of their team, actually. And then in the other client, they just had a really good IT guy there. So it was just him and Chad's team.
I think it's pretty instructive that the CEOs were involved. That kind of surprised me when you said that. So
Oh, yeah,
that's actually it's a good takeaway, actually.
definitely. They
So
want
then,
to know what's going on with this first phase. I think after the first phase, they're going to leave it to the team to kind of take it from there, because now they know what's involved in the process.
and was there? We'll get into this in a second. Was there involvement by the client outside of just participating in meetings? Did they have tasks week to week and deliverables week to week that they had to produce?
I will let Chad
Okay,
talk
I'll
on
let
that.
Chad. I thought you might know the answer to that one, but I think the other thing
There
that's a good
were there were
takeaway.
del there were deliverables, but those were
Right.
guided by Chad's company.
Yeah, but I think your role, you shouldn't diminish your role, frankly, because I think the fact that you had such a good relationship made those CEOs spend that time in the process. And then two is the term I would use for what you actually did was like a program manager. There's always got to be some person that's making the process, move forward, even if you're not doing all the work. And I actually think that's a good takeaway for people from this webinar is, you got to get pretty senior people, particularly if they need to do it that quickly, directly engaged in it. And that's a testament to your relationship with them, man.
Thank you, Michael. And I think a great takeaway also is that, um, it's it's a time sensitive thing. So there is requirements that need to get done in order to achieve the goals of getting them done in a couple of months. And on
Yeah.
the back end, the customers were reaching out to me directly, asking questions. It seems like this is this. Can you kind of give us some guidance on that? It seems like this is this. It's kind of, and they weren't going directly to Chad. And that is a testament, Michael, to the relationships, right?
Yeah.
And helping guide the customer to get the outcome they're looking for.
Well, we'll switch to Chad, and we'll come back to you. I'm really curious about how your relationship with those clients evolved, in addition to CMMC, but just generally after this kind of intense working relationship with them. But we'll come back to that, Dan. So, Chad, can you give us the kind of 30,000-foot level of what's the basic? How did you basically engage with this particular client, I guess?
Sure. Let me start first, Michael, by talking about Prescott and why the name Prescott. I think it's really important. It's something that we set out to differentiate ourselves in the market. First of all, being the owner of a managed IT service provider, MSP, I've seen firsthand when consultants can come in and either make you look good or make you look bad to your end client. And when we set out to create Prescott, the name itself, the agency we hired, who's a friend of mine, Traction, to come up with a name, I said, our whole goal is to come in alongside the managed service provider and make them a hero to their client, period. And Cameron, who owns the firm, said, well, I've got your name. If you know the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere story, it was actually Samuel Prescott who really should have gotten all the, he did all the work. But, of course, we know Paul Revere took, he got the credit in the history books, if you will. And that was our goal, was to essentially kind of come in behind the scenes, working with the managed service provider and the organization seeking certification, the OSC and MSP. And when we're gone, ultimately it's important that Mark and his client have a great relationship, and that it's not lost on me that anybody I bring in, or in this case, Mark brings in, is a reflection on him. So I have a duty to make Mark look good. I have a duty to take great care of Mark's clients. So that's kind of at the foundation of everything we do. A couple other points that Mark had said some things I want to make sure I answer or address is I can't stress enough, don't underestimate how long this takes. Keeping in mind that I also own a managed IT company, so I have clients that are going through this as well. I've been dealing with this now for a few years and learning firsthand how long it takes, understanding that the service that we're providing while our client is going through certification is outside of the scope of the managed service provider contract in most cases. I can tell you it's outside of the scope of Nuwave's contracts. Mark, I think it's outside of the scope of your contracts. There's a tremendous amount of additional time and effort. Mark's time, the account manager's time, it's just time that's outside of your standard MSP contract. So that's something that has to be accounted for. Our partners like Mark, we give them all of our lessons learned. One of those examples is we have within my MSP, we have a dedicated person who is working alongside the MSP account manager, in my case, Nuwave, and the RPO, which is Prescott, the Registered Practitioner Organization, the CMMC consultant. So you've got this another person, and that's a billable person in addition to the managed service provider. So I'm probably beating a dead horse, but that time, Mark, you said at the beginning of the call, I said it was going to be a lot of time, a lot of effort. It is. Another thing is having somebody from leadership of the end customer, the OSC, is critical as well. You need to have a sponsor that is an owner or somebody in the executive suite that has influence over the organization, because it's not just the MSP's time. It's not just new Prescott and Mark's time. It's also their customer. They're going to have a tremendous amount of time. As Mark said, they're attending meetings 2 to 3 times a week, and they leave those meetings, and there's homework that they have to do every time between meetings, and they're drawing on resources within their organization. So it is a tremendous amount of effort there. So Michael, I answered a lot of questions, but I don't know if I answered the question you started.
No, I think could I ask one factual question too? Is SPRS self-certification?
So that phase of it is, so we are going to submit, in this case, Prescott is going to work with Mark and his customer, and we're going to establish the supplier performance risk system score, and that's going to be essentially a third party, which is us, helping them establish that score.
Okay. I just curious.
That phase of it is self-attestation.
Yeah.
It's not self-attestation. It's third party. It's Prescott in this case, giving them that score.
And I assume, again, just factual situation, even though they got the SPRS score and they got the pressure off for getting contracts, are they still pursuing a journey towards CMMC over time?
And that's a case by case, and I'll actually turn that one back to Mark, because that's ultimately every company needs to make that decision for themselves if they want to. It will be a requirement for some of the contracts. We've got companies we've worked with who have maybe automotive and some aerospace, and they're just saying, hey, we're going to shed the aerospace, or we're not going to focus on aerospace, different business reasons. But ultimately, every business needs to make that decision if they want to go for full certification.
Maybe this is a bad question, but if somebody gets a SPRS score, is there some way to say that they're 70% CMMC client, or 80%, or 30%? Is there any correlation like that?
Yeah. So part of our phase one engagement, the very first thing we do is we help them identify we call it CMMC scoping. So we're going to identify where CUI lives in their environment. We're going to put together what's called a plan of action and milestone, or you'll hear it called a POAM. We'll put together a system security plan, data flow, boundary diagram, and that SPRS score. Those are all deliverables of a phase one engagement, which typically takes about 2 months for Prescott to get through with an organization. They can stop there and they've got their SPRS score submitted, and they could stop. From there, if they choose to continue with us, we would move into what we call our phase two, and that's where we come up with the gap analysis and remediation work. The network design. So that's where a lot of the heavy lifting starts and a lot of the work begins. Now, Mark can tell you firsthand, we've already identified a lot of that. We've already, even in that phase one, Mark's got, I think you're getting your nose back above water, right, Mark, with all of the work that's come out of just phase one, right?
Well, we haven't done any of it yet, but there is work that has to be done. And I think, Michael, to your question, irrelevant of what that SPRS score is, you can submit that. So it doesn't matter if it's far negative or far positive. The only thing that's required is that you have a score.
Okay.
So the customer doesn't measure the score and decide to my knowledge, and decide whether they send you the POs or not. They just need to know you have a score, because that's a benchmark to start the process of going through the process of fixing everything that needs to be fixed. Is that correct, Chad? Am I accurate on that?
For now, correct.
So could we take a little bit shorter march through the process there then, Chad? So you said there's 2 phases. Let's stay with phase one first here. And it started out with, what were the major kind of steps in that process?
So phase one, which is, and this is an estimate, but typically we can have it done in a couple of months, 2 to 3 months. We're going to identify the controlled unclassified information, the CUI. We're going to, we go through a scoping assessment. We're going to put the plan of action and milestone, the system security plan, the data flow, boundary diagram, and then the SPRS score. That's all what is done in that first 2 to 3 months.
And those previous 4 steps are required to get the SPRS score? Is that the point?
That's all part of it, correct.
Yeah. And then what's that work? Let's just take, what's that work look like? Is it, what do you do versus what does a client do versus what does Mark do?
So in phase one, there's a lot of discovery. As Mark was saying, it's a lot of documentation and discovery.
Yeah.
We're reviewing contracts. We've got an organization, not one of Mark's clients, but we've got another one we're engaged with, that just the number of contracts they have. We'll probably have 6 months just going all through the CUI scoping and going through all of the contracts. They don't even know what they have. So,
and I assume, therefore, what you're trying to do is control and secure that specific category of information, COIs, confidential.
We're controlled unclassified information. Yeah, CUI.
Controlled.
First of all, is just identifying where is CUI, which contracts have CUI. And it's something that largely, and this is just maybe somewhat of a stereotypical example, but when you walk into an organization, most of the time, this is not something that a lot of leaders and organizations have paid much attention to.
No.
And it's not a blanket statement, but a lot of them haven't. So a lot of times we're having to pull contracts out and just go through the contracts to even help them understand what they have.
And then the other piece of that, Michael, would be that, I mean, to, again, try to put it in layman's terms, for me at least, it was, hey, here's where you are now as a company. This is the assessment. Here's where you need to be. And then here's the action plan to get you there, right?
Yep.
So there's full clarity from the customer as to what needs to happen to get them fully compliant.
Yeah, just for everybody's understanding too, there was two terms of art that I just wanted to clarify. That was one, COIs, and the second one was, I think you're saying data boundary map. What is that? Just out of curiosity, what was
it? Great question, actually. So we'll put together a network diagram and show where does COI live. An example of that would be, maybe you've got 40 people in your organization, but only 5 people have access to CUI. So we'll show a network diagram and show, and it's all color coded. You'll see where does CUI come into the environment, where can it travel within the environment, and you'll see very specifically visually where does controlled unclassified information live in your environment.
And I assume it's not just digital, right? I mean, is it physical security involved too, or is it that?
It's a really great question. Yeah, Mark probably has an answer. I'll give you yes, it is both paper documents and digital documents. And Mark, you probably got some. I've got some too. So go ahead. Some examples.
It's everything. It's all of that. So many of the people print out documents. They print out. They receive paper. Maybe their plans that come out that they have to actually print out and lay out on a table, right, to look and do what they're doing. Yeah. That becomes paper. Now that has to be managed, and it has to be kept in a specific area, and it can't walk past certain boundaries. So a lot of it's any type of material and where that material lives within the organization. It could be paper, it could be electronic, it could be camera footage, it could be anything, right? It's where that classified information lives.
So
after
for
those paper. I was going to say, for those paper documents too, one of the things you'll find is that organizations, a lot of them don't have video surveillance, and that's an additional thing where helping clients understand that there's going to be areas of your facility that you're going to have under video so that you can see it, visually see the CUI, both the paper records of it, but also if anything that is CUI.
Luckily, Mark's in the camera business too, so if they need that, they can still turn to their MSP. So then we get their SPRS Score. Let's just take the one that had the contract pressure. And then they got that pressure alleviated. I believe you said there was a phase. Do you let them know what phase 2 looks like, even though they may not just immediately jump into phase 2? Is that what the gap analysis does?
We show at the very beginning, when we're first talking with a new prospective client, we're showing them what an entire journey looks like, all the way to the point of bringing in they call it a C3PAO, a certified third-party assessing organization. So CMMC, simply put, there's consultants and then there's assessors, and the consultants, and you can do both. You just can't do both for the same company. So what we're talking about today is consulting with, in this case, Mark's clients, to get them prepared. So we'll sign off and say, yes, this company is ready to have a third party come in and do an actual assessment.
And you would, leaving the certification part out. So then what you could offer to them after that is, I think you said the word gap analysis. So it's basically what they have to do in order to go from their current SPRS Score or NIST score to start becoming prepared to be CMMC compliant.
Correct. Yeah, we'll show that. We'll work with the OSC and the MSP and show them exactly from A to Z, wherever they're at, exactly what needed to be done to be ready to have a third party come in and do an assessment.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, with this particular client, were they doing a lot of stuff right and just not documenting it, or did they have to do different things to get a decent SPRS Score? If that made any sense. So in other words,
I
I
would
would
say
assume like a company that didn't do this before would have a hard time proving that they are doing anything because they wouldn't have the documentation. They wouldn't have, they not having gone through this process, they wouldn't have to prove it to anybody, right? Even to
I think that
themselves. To a certain extent.
I think that your point is very it's right on point. I think a
Yeah.
lot of this is which Chad kind of spoke about. A lot of it's documentation, right? It's having
Yeah.
the information about what to do and how to do it. And with the way I explain it to clients, and Chad can obviously correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I tell them that if anything were to happen within your environment, there was supposed to be there's some kind of penetration of your data, right? There's something that happens. They need to know exactly how it happened, where it happened, the time it happened, what caused the issue, and what is the remediation process in order to fix the problem. And all of
Mhm.
those things become very critical because they need to know who got our stuff and what happened and how did it get penetrated, which is to Chad's point why cameras need to be there, right? Because you got
Mhm.
paper, you're looking at things. Well, maybe somebody walked in and just took it off the desk and walked out the door. So you
Yeah.
need to be able to provide all that information at all points of time when that information, whether it's paper, electronic, or whatever, is touched and
Mhm.
used. And that is essentially the concept behind it.
So I have one last question for, I think you both can answer this one because let me start with Mark. Is having gone through this process and going through all this exhaustive analysis, I guess, how do you see your relationship with that particular client changing going forward in terms of like the technology they need from you? Was there an opportunity for you to offer things to them that they hadn't previously cared about?
No, I think that hopefully they have a good MSP, right? That's taken them through a lot of stuff. What it's
Yeah.
taught me and the relationship is that there's only certain products that are compliant,
Hmm.
right? So before you take the journey, it's like, well, they may have the best backup that you offer, the best firewall that you offer, but those products may not be on the certification list, which really, Chad, we didn't really touch on, to be certified, to go through the compliance part of this equation. So then it's like, well, I sold you all these things, and now I got to resell you a bunch of other stuff because now you're going through the compliance, right? But the relationship is the same. It hasn't changed. The trust
Yeah.
factor is the same, if not better. Chad's company made me look great. Hopefully,
Hmm.
I made Chad's company look good, and it was a win-win for both of us. It's exhausting going through it, but to answer the core question, the relationship is just as strong as it was, if not stronger. And now there's action plans when they're ready to move forward to get stuff done.
And I think you mentioned you have a couple more coming down the pike. So this is yeah,
We will
worked
have
so
done
good you're
four of
willing to do
them
it
by
over
the
and
end
over
of
again.
yeah, we'll have four of them done by the end of this year for
That's cool.
four clients that will have the SPRS scores.
So I'll ask the same
Michael,
question from your perspective.
go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to say, I'll echo everything Mark said, but I'll also add that this will make an MSP better by going through this. It will make you a better, more mature managed service provider. I can tell you that happened to Nuwave when we took Nuwave through this, and ultimately the cybersecurity hygiene of the client that you're serving is going to be dramatically improved. What we've seen in most instances is very few companies have everything in place that they need to do from a technical standpoint, and this is going to significantly raise the bar of what they're doing from a cybersecurity hygiene perspective. So
Hmm.
I would
That's
echo
great.
that. It's
there
a
are
great
also, I'll make another point that a lot of MSPs, in my opinion, won't be able to do this for their clients. I think that we're going to see over the next 12 to 18, 24 months, MSPs who are saying, and I've talked to some MSP owners who've just said, this is too much work. I'm already burned out, buried. I can't bring on the additional tool stack and support and everything that's required to support the CMMC clients. So it's going to be a shakeup in the market. And I don't know how that shakes out, but when you've got MSPs saying, I can't do this, that is going to be an impact in the market too.
Well, I think that's one thing I admire about Mark is he's probably one of the most optimistic can-do people I've met in my life. And he's
Yeah,
also
it's
one
a
of the
lot.
people when a customer asks him to do something that's important, he will figure out every single creative way that he can actually get it done. And I've seen that that's kind of a daily occurrence in Mark's company. So I appreciate you guys investing the time. I think it's an important message for MSPs to hear. And I also can't think of two better MSPs for them to learn from than you two guys. So I appreciate this is like an all-star game for me. We get, the all-star CMMC guy and the all-star relationship guy and Mark's. So I appreciate the time. And with that, I'll wrap it up. And thank you both for investing the time with me today.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you
you,
both.
Michael. Thanks,
Thank you.
Chad. Have a
Thank you.
great day.
Let me try.